Hey class, nice to join you in this way. Wish I could be with you in person or even with you online today. Rose asked, I do anything Rose asked me to do. Rose asked me to say a little introduction to Mere Christianity. I'm delighted you guys are reading this book. It's absolutely amazing. It's an amazing book because it has staying power. It's sold millions of copies since the year 2000. It was published in 1952. I mean, not many books can say such a thing. Christianity Today, in the year 2000, they asked a bunch of Christians all over to rank the top books of the century. And Mere Christianity came in number one in terms of shaping lives, changing things. That's absolutely amazing. What a great book. It originated in 1941 in England. Now you have to remember this was the war, and you had the Blitz. The BBC invited C.S. Lewis to come give some radio addresses to the nation in the evenings. And the BBC building had been bombed out, as had many people's homes. That's incredible. And we still have a couple of recordings from that you can hear. You can Google it online and listen to his voice. He's got a thick accent. It's kind of cool. So Lewis came and he wanted to talk about Christianity to people. And it's so interesting. You will see an apologist, right? We talk about apologetics. This is when you kind of make the case for Christianity. And he called, I think, the first lecture, The Case for Christianity. Was he an apologist? Yes. Was he a translator of Christianity? One of the things that he said when he wrote those children's books, like The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the whole Narnia series, he said, I'm preparing children's hearts to hear the gospel when they're older. Like, I love that. So Lewis helped people hear the gospel sort of like in fresh terms. That's why it's interesting that the book has translated so well so long. I wrote it back in the 40s. There were radio addresses. Now we still read it on paper, and it still works. The United Kingdom in those days, I mean, they were getting bombed, but they were not a religious people. I think they pulled English people at the time, and a bunch of them didn't even know what Easter was. Not a heavy church-going population, pretty cynical, skeptical. And to such people, Lewis made his case for Christianity. They gave him a little bit of money for doing this. There can't have been much in the BBC budget back in those days. They gave him a little bit of money for doing this, and he took that money and he donated it to war widows and orphans. That's kind of cool, in character. He gave the radio addresses, and a publisher was more than willing to put it into book form because he'd written another book called Screwtape Letters, which is itself fascinating, and it had sold so well they thought, oh, this will make another good book to make good money for us. In Mere Christianity, what you find is C.S. Lewis explaining Christianity to people that might have their doubts about it, and I think it works for people who don't have their doubts about it. It just helps you think through the logic, the rationality. It's not a sledgehammer approach, though. Like, here's the logic, and you must accept this. The whole feel of Mere Christianity is like you're sitting down with a friend, in the evening, and you're eating some cheese or maybe having a glass of wine, I don't know, and you're just talking about things, and he's sort of saying, well, here's what I think, and why, sort of teasing out his own thought. He really explains, in some ways, his own process. Lewis had conversion's the wrong word. It's not like he was some heathen pagan person. He was what we call a theist. Like if you'd ask him, is there a God? He'd say, well, yeah, there's a God, distant, nothing personal. It was just not a thing for him. He worked through his own process and came to faith, and he really explains this. And it's interesting what that meant for him, publishing Mere Christianity and it becoming so popular. He was a professor of English literature at Oxford. That's like as good a job as you can get if your specialty is English literature. He was probably the world's leading authority on medieval and Renaissance English literature. That's pretty cool in and of itself. He lost his chair at Oxford, though. Like, they wouldn't have him on their faculty anymore. So he spent his last years in Cambridge. He's buried in Oxford. Took my daughter Sarah there a few years back and visited his grave. That was fun. There's a guy named A.N. Wilson who wrote a biography of Lewis. I love what he said about this, why Lewis lost his chair at Oxford. He said first of all, it was because he wrote Mere Christianity and Screwtape Letters. I mean, these are academic intellectuals, right? And he's writing these kind of simple, accessible books that are evangelical about Christianity, trying to persuade people about things like the reality of evil and the devil and why you should believe if you don't believe. It's just not an academically respectable kind of thing to do. Wilson said that it's not just that he wrote those books, it was more damaging that millions of people read them and really liked them. Oxford felt embarrassed and they let Lewis go. That's amazing, isn't it? His fifth and last broadcast, you'll read this, it's divided into chapters, is almost an altar call. He kind of makes the case for Christianity, and then it's like, you got to choose. Like, you got to make your choice. You can't do this kind of tepid thing like he did for years, which is, yeah, there's a God, that's fine. This altar call changed a lot of people significantly. Chuck Colson, he's a Watergate burglar, and he became a great evangelist, noteworthy for prison ministry. Chuck Colson read Mere Christianity and changed everything for him. Another guy that's been in the news recently, Francis Collins, he's a doctor. He's been the head of the Human Genome Project, and he's the director of the National Institute for Health. President Biden just asked him to stay on for a little bit longer. He was getting ready to retire. Francis Collins spoke in our church 12 years ago. I can't remember. He was an atheist. He just didn't believe in God. He wasn't even a theist. He was nothing. And he read Mere Christianity, and he wrote this. He said, as I read Mere Christianity, my materialist view of the world was laid to ruins. I'd been an atheist, and that crumbled before Lewis's words about the reality of Christianity. That's pretty good. I have a little bit of that story myself. 1974, church was not on my radar screen. God was barely there. I didn't think much about God ever. I was kind of like Lewis. If you'd ask me, is there a God? I'd say, no, I think so. Not sure. I don't know. If I got in trouble, I'd probably see if he'd do me a favor. I bought a copy. Nobody handed me a copy. Somebody said, you need to buy this book, Mere Christianity. I was trying to figure out life in the world. So I went and I bought one. My copy of it still says on the cover, $1.95. Can't buy it for that today. Brand new, bought it for $1.95. There are markings, underlinings all through it. I was inching toward a vital faith, and that book really took me a long way because I was a science guy. I was a science, chemistry, physics major. I just, to me, I didn't think of Christianity being like a rational thing. There was any logic to it. And I read Lewis, and it just did so much for me. This isn't irrational. This isn't, just for intuitive, deeply spiritual, pious people. It's for everybody. It's for people like me who have questions and doubts and try to make sense of things. So I commend to you your reading of Mere Christianity. I'd love to hear what you're getting out of it, what you're learning from it, how you react to it. It's an old book, but I think it's still got that staying power, speaks across the years. Thanks so much for letting me be with you.